Mike Golic Jr. back here with you on the Bleacher Report college football streams. As always, check us out here. Used to be every Tuesday. Had to take a little break around the holidays. The season ended. A lot's been going on here, but we're going to be with you here. We're going to be with you getting you ready for the Texas A&M Miami game this weekend. A great stream coming up that we're very excited about with Johnny Manziel ahead of one of what I think is the best game of the first weekend of college football. As always, come check us out. Set the reminders on the BR app, the Bleacher Report YouTube channel. Hit us up in the chat. We always love hearing from you and having a conversation about this sport. And man, in the last couple of weeks since I've been away, we got a lot to talk about with everybody here. So if you're new, unfamiliar with I played college football at Notre Dame. I played in the offensive line there from 2008 to 2012. And now I get to call games for TNT in the Big 12. So been a great year, been an awesome football season, tons of controversy like we talked about last time in the college football playoff rankings, but that all fades into the distance. We got coaching searches going on. We got the playoffs to look ahead to. We have our overreaction or not, and of course, our quarterback trust tree heading into the first round of the CFP coming up this weekend. So with all that in mind, I want to start in the offseason because outside of the 12 teams that are getting ready to play in the college football playoff, even if you're in a bowl game, you're kind of working on next year. And a big part of that's become the transfer portal. So we're going to play a little matchmaker right now. We're going to try and sort some of the best quarterbacks that have made their way into the transfer portal already and take those names and spit them out into what we think could be teams that are interesting matches for them going forward. If you've got ideas, if you've got suggestion, if you're pissed that we've offered this quarterback to your team, hit us up in the chat and let us know. I want to start off with one that I got to see up close and personal. Brendan Sorsby is the quarterback at Cincinnati for the last couple of seasons here. Sorsby, as we see on top of this list, coming off a year in Cincinnati where they were just close, but not quite there in terms of being ready to compete at the highest level in the Big 12. Sorsby, dual threat quarterback, incredibly important legs for the Cincinnati rushing attack. Arms, I think, his best day of the season. We had their game on the road against Kansas and was a shootout both ways. And I thought for that game, his intermediate passing worked out really well. He was able to pull off some pretty impressive stuff. So shout out to Baron Morton there with the touchdown pass, giving credit to Sorsby. They look similar. The jerseys are similar. I get it. This is an interesting one for me. Fernando Mendoza likely going to be the top quarterback taken in the draft this year. So there's going to be a little vacancy at Indiana. And last time on Dragon Ball Z, lest we not forget, Brendan Sorsby began his career in Indiana with the Hoosiers. And so I'll look at this and say, I'll send Sorsby to Indiana, and I'll have him succeeding Fernando Mendoza, who, remember, last year, most of y'all hadn't heard of Fernando Mendoza last year at Cal. Some of the sickos who are rocking with the Calgorithm got to see him go 98 yards with his boys. I think Sorsby going back home to where it all started could be really interesting. And again, I think this is a really good quarterback when you look at what he'd be asked to do. His legs affected the game will be important. Indiana's offense, I would say, on their best day, always has Fernando Mendoza finding ways to impact the ground in a timely fashion. I think Sorsby's a much more consistent run threat, different kind of runner than Mendoza, who's a little bit more lumbering. So I think that combined with a guy that can make quick decisions under fire, which you've got to do in Indiana's largely RPO-based offense, think that could be a really good fit for both parties involved, and Sorsby trying to do that. I see people trying to read the tea leaves. Sorsby going to Texas Tech. He's got a girlfriend committed there. I forget in what sport, if it's volleyball or softball, one of the two. I understand that. That for me is a way to read the tea leaves I'm not always going to subscribe to with the other factors at play here, namely the money, the opportunity. And if you're looking at them right now, hey, Texas Tech, it's a conversation we can have right now, actually. Let's look at Dylan Raiola. Welcome to Texas Tech. Like, fulfill the prophecy. Become Patrick Mahomes. It seems very obvious. He announced his transfer from Nebraska this year, where he threw for 2,000 yards, 18 touchdowns against 6 interceptions. Like, everyone's had fun with the cosplaying Mahomes thing here, but he's another guy. Like, I saw someone put in the chat, like, not a lot of mobility, but good arm strength here. Like, that's kind of what Texas Tech has dealt with some this year. Like, I don't think Baron Morton's been lighting it up as far as his mobility, maybe moving around in the pocket, certainly dealt with a little bit of injury at points this year, but like, you're back there to sling the rock in another offense that is a lot more about getting the ball out of the quarterback's hands and playing point guard, getting the ball out in the perimeter, taking some of the shots that we saw to the tight end room there. But this one just seems like it's like I'll be stunned. I've seen plenty of memes about it, but I think there's football reasons that make sense for this too. He's a guy with I think a ton more natural arm talent than Baron Morton. And so when you're looking at what the next step is for Texas Tech on offense, because we'll talk about the playoff matchups in a little bit. My worry for Texas Tech is on offense. We've seen in the biggest games they've played this year and really twice against BYU as well. It's a team where the quarterback I don't think is accurate enough, especially in red zone situations on balls that are there to be made. I don't think, they've got a ton of high level dynamic playmaking. The tight end room, like we said, is good. They got a couple of solid wide receivers, but they need a quarterback who's going to add a few more big time throws to the bag. So the protection is going to be important. We'll wait to see there. Sam Leavitt, Arizona State. This one's really interesting. Sam Leavitt, to me, would be a fascinating fit at the University of Miami. So Carson Beck going to be out after this playoff run for Miami, we reckon. And I look at Sam Leavitt's game. I got to call Arizona State 3 times this year. Unfortunately, only one of those games featured Sam Leavitt. He was hurt after that. Sam Leavitt running the 2024 Miami offense that they ran for Cam Ward, where it's largely predicated on the quarterback's ability to drop back and make plays with his arms and his legs. It seems like the easiest comp. Like Sam Leavitt going into this year, it was a tough year, right? Like Jordan Tyson was banged up a little bit for them at wide receiver, and then Leavitt's banged up at the end of the year, and so you get Jeff Sims in there, basically turns that into a triple option threat at quarterback. But on Leavitt's best days, including the day where they were able to take down Texas Tech when they had their backup quarterback in, the playmaking ability for him outside of structure was still the area that he shined. You could argue, hey, maybe needed to take the next step as a guy that worked more inside the function of the offense, inside the structure of the offense, I should say. And that didn't really happen. Like, he's got a lot of maverick to his game. And if he's a guy that wants to make that jump to the next level at some point, he's got the arm strength. He's got the ability to throw the deep ball. I do think he just needs to calm down some of the hero ball. But we saw Miami's a place that can tolerate that. This year's been a lot different. But Carson Beck's skill set is also a lot different. He's at his best when he's well protected in a clean pocket and get the ball out on time without having to do a lot of the extracurricular stuff. So Sam Leavitt would be an interesting callback to what they experienced during that Cam Ward series with him at the helm. So again, and with I see it in the chat right now, like a lot of people talking about the money of all this. All the programs that I've named. Now, IU, it's a little bit more new money, like the Mark Cuban stuff that gets talked about with them. But Texas Tech, we know they've got the oil money. Miami, we know they're certainly stocked as well. The portal coffers and what they've done in recruiting are certainly emblematic of that. But I don't know, we're also getting into the first real offseason of rev share. Second, I guess, coming back to this summer, but people are going to have a lot more of that together now. So, I think that with these players in particular, the last two, we're kind of dealing on a somewhat even playing field, although Texas Tech feels like they're willing to break the bag in a way that very few people are. And who knows, next year they might have to rely on that offense a little bit more. You're going to have so many of the best parts of that defense go on to the NFL. Maybe their scouting department nails it again, but this could be an important offseason for them. All right, I see a lot of stuff about Lagway in the chat. I've seen Tennessee get mixed in there. The one that was interesting to me, and you're right, don't forget LSU and Oregon with Nike money, 100%. Miami 6. Miami 6, yeah. 100%. Completely agree. Oregon always going to be players in this. They'll be fascinating if Dante Moore decides to leave, which, we'll see. Ancient Hunter is where I want to go. Lagway and Baylor might be a good fit. So for anyone unaware, DJ's dad was at Baylor back in the day. And I think the other sell here is Jake Spavital, their offensive coordinator, who we saw what they were able to do this last couple of seasons, how explosive that passing attack was. For Sawyer Robertson, who different kind of quarterback, right? But to go and get that out of him in an offense that catered to him, and there's going to be no Michael Trigg at tight end anymore, who is their most dynamic weapon. But I look at all things equal, right? Spavital's a coordinator who's got history with some great quarterbacks helping develop them. Lagway needs a fresh start at a place that might be comparatively less in the spotlight. He was the number one recruit in the class 5 games into last year when he took over at the end of the season. I thought he was going to be a guy that was the number one pick of the 2027 draft class, and he spent most of this offseason injured and didn't get a lot of the development that he needed there. This Florida team had other issues that also led to the firing of their head coach, and so I look at all that and say, what if you got him to a place where, hey, let's be frank about Baylor going into the season. A lot of people in an uncomfortable position. They bring back Dave Aranda because they didn't want to go wading into the coaching offseason waters with everybody else, but he's walking into this season immediately on the hot seat. There's a lot of pressure on this group to go out there and try and do something, but also not really a ton of expectations, especially in the current landscape of the Big 12 with some of the teams that we saw up top now changing in Iowa State, at Kansas State with the coaching staffs there, changing in the guard, no more Jalen Daniels at Kansas, plenty of stuff. Texas Tech, like we said, going to be graduating a bunch of important guys. So anything can happen with the portal as situated, but this could be one where between being able to go back home and play around family and people that he knows, going to his dad's alma mater, and being at a place where, hey, you got a little less heat on you, but you've got a coordinator who's absolutely a proven developer at that position, could be very enticing for a guy that I still think is an incredible talent and upside at that position. Like, it's hard to see him on his best day and not still see a guy that could be a top 5 pick in the draft going forward. Last but certainly not least, Drew Mestemaker, North Texas. Come on down, put up the gaudy numbers that we talked about for a lot of this season. This one, to me, like, I don't want to take it for granted, but so much of modern football is watching coaches leave and pluck the core parts of their roster. So follow Eric Morris to Oklahoma State and prosper. Oklahoma State is going to be fascinating to watch what Eric Morris can make of that program in short order. Things had gotten stale in the last couple of years. Mike Gundy is a legend, everything he did as a player and as a coach at that school, but they need a shot of fresh life there. And so if you can come in and do that, like, there is still a competition for resources that could be outside of Texas Tech, who's kind of separated themselves in terms of the level of investment. Make it interesting, especially if you can get the quarterback position ironed out there again in a way that it felt like it hadn't been in a while. I just think drawing the easy through line of, hey, you're a quarterback that had a ton of success with this staff and how they do business. Why would you want to screw up a good thing? You can make the jump to the next level. Ronnie Heim would be a good fit at ASU as well. That'd be an interesting one. Like, Arizona State, going to be fascinating to watch. I know they've got a couple of young guys that they like around there, big-time recruits that they've, or excuse me, not big-time recruits, but they've got a couple of young guys on that roster, at least one young guy on that roster that they really like, but certainly would be a team, especially once they get through the Kenny Dillingham of it all, which we'll get to next, talking about the Michigan coaching and search, how they attack the portal come January. And for anyone that's not aware, new rule change came up. January 2nd is when the portal opens, and we get that 15-day window popping off there. So these are a few. Again, fire away. Our producer Ryan will offer up some of your suggestions to me if you've got better fits for any of these guys. But this was just my first kind of pass at trying to crystal ball it. I'm not basing it off any insider information. That's not the stuff I do. I'm looking at game. I'm seeing what some of these guys' backgrounds, following the breadcrumbs of some of the coaching stuff, and trying to figure out how we can make it fit from there. Let's talk about Michigan. Michigan has had a month to forget. Coming off what was, compared to last year, a very successful season on the field, didn't ultimately culminate in the win against Ohio State, ends with Michigan making the decision to terminate their head coach, Sharon Moore, with cause for after an investigation produced credible and evidence in their mind of allegations of an inappropriate relationship with a staffer. So they make the decision to move on. Biff Poggi right now coaching them through the bowl games, an absolute cartoon character. Got to call a game of his when he was coaching high school football back when I was at ESPN. And seems like he's doing right by the players right now. In terms of shepherding them through what's got to be a tremendously confusing time. So I have, a lot of empathy and sympathy for what those players are. It's not empathy, sympathy for those players and what they're going through in a really hard time. And so Michigan is standing on the precipice of something. They're still a very highly coveted job, but you've seen what happens in this day and age if you don't make the right decision or you wait too long to make the right decision, and things can go haywire in a hurry. So going forward, the biggest thing I'm sure on the minds of a lot of Michigan fans, to an extent, is what happens with Bryce Underwood. Now, don't get it twisted. It was a disappointing freshman season, but I know people had the caveat of not feeling like they did a lot with that staff to develop Bryce Underwood. It was mostly talent, the guy jamming turbo on the joystick and just going out and throwing fastballs and a spread RPO offense. Like, you could see the talent there is still undeniable, but there was just not a lot of touch to his game that developed even towards the end of the season. And so, I don't know if there's going to be any renegotiating or driving up too hard of a bargain. Like, I don't know if you're in a totally advantageous situation if you're Underwood from that regard based on how you played that first year. But the priority for Michigan would be to keep him going forward. And so you've got to stick the landing on that to try and make sure you keep him around and make sure you keep the core of the recruits you signed in the early signing period around, and that so you can hit the portal in a way that keeps you on this trajectory that after the down year in the wake of the sign stealing scandal and the Harbaugh stuff, you managed to get back to a 9-win season, being somewhat in contention down the stretch of the season. So this is the big board that of names that you've kind of seen most talked about with this. Some I think are more realistic than others, but the Michigan head coaching big board. I'll say this. I have heard Kalen DeBoer's name mentioned so much in this conversation. I have it on the board. Unless the folks at Alabama force him out, if they lose to Oklahoma again in a game they should win in the first round of the playoff and are bounced and sent home after being snubbed last year, if you tell me they push him out or there's a mutual understanding behind the screens that, hey, you better take this job and do it, great. But one, if you're Alabama, where are you going after this? Like, where's the easy fit in terms of the Kalen DeBoer replacement? And two, that's not a, upward move. Michigan's a good job. It's not better than Alabama. There might be less of the pressure that he's dealing with and, more of a fit based on his background. But man, the fit stuff, like, I know we're in the post Brian Kelly world where people are back on buying into all that, but I think winning fixes a lot of that. And, post Saban relative to expectation, I feel like Kalen DeBoer's come in, especially this year, and righted the ship in a lot of ways. Last month hasn't been pretty, but I'd be very surprised if he, of his own accord, left that job for Michigan, because it's not a better job. Kenny Dillingham's the other one, and Kenny has been a guy who has talked about how much he loves Arizona State. He's from out there. He went to Arizona State. He bleeds for that school. He's been a vocal proponent for them in so many ways, trying to ignite, the local fan base there, the booster core to support them in the way they need financially. And maybe all this is posturing, but you heard the last couple of answers from him publicly being asked about this job and trying to put out the flames. And it hasn't really sounded like a definitive no in a way that makes me a little bit curious, but still unsure. Jesse Minter was the national championship defensive coordinator. Now with the Los Angeles Chargers, this another one, like, would be pie in the sky, like, comes from the Harbaugh stuff, incredibly successful on defense. Seems like he's got that juice, but if I'm Jesse Minter, you're going to be a head coach in the NFL soon. I don't know why you'd want to sign up for what college is right now. That's just me. So I don't see, again, that's another one unrealistic. The two that are interesting to me now, Jedd Fisch, to me, is like the layup answer for most attainable. Still, I think a good hire, has had success at a couple of different stops now recently between Arizona and Washington, has displayed a willingness to leave for a better job. And right now, Michigan, traditionally Michigan, a better job than Washington, but certainly right now as well. So Jedd Fisch, comes in, history with the quarterback, history at Michigan, like, checks a lot of the boxes in a way that make it easy. Good sell to the fan base, stabilizing force at a time where things have been very tumultuous over recent years. And then there's the one that just became available recently. Kyle Whittingham stepped down as the Utah head coach. And then it was reported after that he wasn't retiring, he was just stepping down at Utah, after being the face of that program for decades, one of the longest tenured head coaches in the sport at any one school. And so if he's not done coaching and you could get Kyle Whittingham, a guy who embodies all the things that you want to as a Michigan program in the Big Ten, playing that tough brand of football across both lines of scrimmage, consistency, knowing how to do this at an incredibly high level, having done it for years already, like not taking a chance like you did on Sharon Moore, succeeding, but not having been the head coach before, that'd be pie in the sky. Like, the Kyle Whittingham hire would be a home run, even if maybe longevity-wise it's not what you're hoping for. But if I had to call it right now, Jedd Fisch feels like the most likely answer, but these are the other ones in there as the variables going forward. So Michigan head coaching search, I'm sure going to heat up as we get closer and closer towards that portal. Because remember, when you hire your new coach, the portal opens for 15 days, regardless of when it is. So when Michigan chooses to announce this relative to that date is going to be very interesting to see if they want to try and time that up so that they're not overexposed in terms of when guys can and can't leave, or if they're very confident in the hire, maybe they want to open that up so that they've got plenty of time to go and make some moves. We'll wait and see. Let's look ahead and talk a little bit about the ball coming up on the field. On the field in round one of the college football playoff. So, again, we've got first round buys for Indiana, Ohio State, Texas Tech, and Georgia. So I still think the teams that are top 4 seeds should get to host home games. I have a feeling when we go to 16, the top 8 will get to host. There won't be any buys, and these teams will all get to collect on, the money, the attention for their school. Like I saw all the stuff about, I get the game's not at Tulane, but still the exposure that you get at this level for being involved in these events, and especially to have it at your home field, to me is a great opportunity that, the top 4 seeds have earned with the way they've played ball. Looking into this weekend, we know the drill, right, with the 2 teams ranked near the bottom, the group of 5 teams in James Madison and Tulane. Tulane's a 17.5-point dog against an Ole Miss team that beat them by 35 earlier in the season. James Madison's a 21.5-point dog against an Oregon team that's outside of the top 4, probably the one most positioned in most people's minds to be a true national championship contender. So if we're looking at who could surprise, Whispering Pilgrim, Marcus Freeman to Michigan, give me a break. You don't believe that. No one else does. I appreciate people that might want to try and come in here and rattle my cage, but you're going to have to do it with something that's realistic and not that fan fiction. But I digress. So if you're looking for the game that could be the big shocker of week 1, like what team would be best positioned to maybe surprise people relative to expectation? Because like I said, James Madison and Tulane, I don't fault them for being here. The system messed up with the ACC championship tiebreaker, and that's why we've got 2. I think having the group of 5 involved in this is good, and the people that want them out, they're entitled to their opinion. I just don't agree with it. I think as long as we're making up an invitational, we should try and service the entirety of the sport to an extent and not just the really good teams with a lot of money. Trust me, I'm a Notre Dame alum. If anyone would be in a position to be mad that their team was left out, it would certainly be me, and I'm not going to burn them to the ground. Looking at this weekend, so of the Power 4 teams that advanced, because we know, I don't think either the group of 5 teams is going to win. But of the Power 4 teams that advance, Oklahoma and Miami have the worst odds. Miami's the one that's interesting to me. You're going up against a Texas A&M team that tasted its own blood at the end of the year against a rival in Texas and has had some time to recoil over that. But when you look at the parts that they're made up of, right? Ruben Bain, we can have the NFL conversation if you want about the measurables. I know in college that guy's a game wrecker. Akeem Mesidor and him on that defensive front have been a problem. What they've been able to do this year over year, in improving that defense is otherworldly. And you're coming off a game where Marcel Reed looked a little bit less than the guy that we had seen before. And so now all of a sudden, if you do that under pressure, I think Texas A&M offensive line is good, not great. And so if you get him under a little bit of pressure, is he willing to give the ball up again? Could he put it in harm's way? Is he going to play a little more of the timid brand of football instead of the gunslinger stuff that we saw in some of the games they won, with Concepcion and so much of the speed in that receiver room? And the other thing is the other side for Miami and what we've seen, the offense is another group. Good, not great offensive line, but big, hulking, gets in the way really well for these guys up front. And you can build the plane out of Malachi Toney, put him all over the field. He's an incredibly dynamic playmaker. They've used him at Wildcat quarterback. They've put him in the backfield and motioned him out of there. They use him obviously out at wide receiver, move him all over the field. He's a jack of all trades piece that could maybe slow down this Texas A&M defense a bit. That, I went back and watched the Virginia Tech Miami game, and that was the one where my ears perked up. Virginia Tech, I can see why they wanted to keep Brent Pry around on defense. The numbers weren't there, but that looked like a mature outfit football-wise in the way they played. And they did a lot of the same stuff that Texas A&M is going to do. Multiple up front, guys in the interior that can cause you some problems. Cassius Howell, one of the leading sack artists in college football, to me is the big challenge to see what it's going to look like and can they keep Carson Beck upright and keep him from making mistakes. But Carson Beck, after the losing 2 of 3 games where turnovers were the issue, is him, has looked a lot better at the end of the season, has taken care of the football, but still a guy that when under pressure at times can make some poor decisions. That was how especially Louisville was able to get to him there, changing the picture up on him, making the look. You're Ancient Hunter, I agree with you. Carson Beck is going to make or break this game. And the thing that worries me is Texas A&M is good at a lot of that same stuff. This Mike Elko defense, where going into this season, he's back calling the defense. This is a guy who's really good at changing the picture pre and post snap and applying pressure without always having to send extra bodies, but giving that illusion, that simulated pressure stuff. Like, that's what I worry about a bit with Carson Beck. But you look, mature quarterback, good enough offensive line, dynamic weapon in the skill room, and a defense that's championship level. That wouldn't be a team that surprised me if they won this weekend, but I think the run they could go on with those parts potentially would be the one I think could shock people. Ole Miss is also going to be interesting to watch. Like we mentioned, they got a Tulane team that people don't expect to be a problem for them, despite all the change. Lane Kiffin's not there anymore, but you look at who still remains there. So Lane Kiffin leaves, but Charlie Weiss Jr. is still there as the offensive coordinator and the play caller. Passing game coordinator and wideouts coach Jordan McDonald stuck around. Assistant quarterbacks coach Dane Stevens and senior analyst and receivers coach Sawyer Jordan. So all these guys that are going to go to LSU with Lane eventually allowed to come back and coach. So for the continuity portion of it, how much that affects things, we'll see. I've heard from different people the idea that maybe the longer it goes on, the more difficult it gets. But right now you're in rhythm. Like, you know how to operate. You know what you're supposed to be doing. The prep the last couple of weeks has probably been a little bit different given the time and everything that's happened. But for the most part, you guys know how to do things. And as Pete Golding takes over, I know he's made tweaks and little things already, but it's not going to be wholesale change. And so as far as the things that I would crave as a player and did, it was, hey, let's keep as much of the core stuff the same as we can so that I'm the same brand of comfortable that we've been. Because the bottom line is, Kejuan Lacey, Trinidad Chambliss still live here. You've got incredible weapons on offense and a defense that's going to hold up in critical moments, even if they might give up some stuff on the ground. So I think when you look at the path that they've got ahead of them in terms of can Ole Miss do this without Lane Kiffin or not, I think the answer is yes. You're going to play a Tulane team that you've already beaten and that you have a severe talent advantage against. And then the next team you'd see is a Georgia team that, lest we not forget, they went to Athens and were up through 3 quarters. Now, you allow 17 unanswered in the 4th quarter, and the rest is history. And this Georgia team's playing markedly better football, but at the very least, you come into that with the confidence of a team that knows, hey, we've gone toe-to-toe with these guys and felt like we're better at certain portions. So I absolutely think Ole Miss can still overcome the loss of Lane Kiffin. I don't know if anyone cracks the top 3 in terms of like the national championship stuff. Like, if you asked me to pick that game, it would still probably be Georgia. But I guess the point is, I don't think the loss of Lane Kiffin is going to totally paralyze this team and have them at risk of, giving one away on the opening weekend like this. The team with the most pressure going into this weekend, though, far and away, the Alabama team we talked about before, right? Your head coach is being talked about for the Michigan job, even while he's still your head coach. You got left out of the college football playoff last year and were the source of a lot of the conversation in the offseason. And now this year, you were the team that wound up in the crosshairs after conference championship weekend because no one around the rest of the country thought you should have been there. Everyone thought it should have been Miami and Notre Dame in there, and Alabama gets in. And I'm not saying they weren't deserving given their resume, but that was the conversation. Alabama had been leaking oil over the last month of the season. They lost 2 of their last 3 games, including that SEC championship game where you have negative rushing yards against Georgia. Like, it's been bad for a little bit here now. And it's an Oklahoma team that last time you played, everyone's like, all right, they shouldn't have really lost that game. They shouldn't have they outgained Oklahoma in every meaningful statistical category. But Oklahoma comes up with 3 turnovers in that game and has 17 points off turnovers, including a pick 6, and the rest is history. So Alabama, I believe, is a slight favorite on the road in this game. And if they don't win and you're 1-2 for Kalen DeBoer, you are out of the playoff and in year 1 with that loss to Vanderbilt that was such a shock to so many in the middle of the season. And now you come out of this and you're bounced in the first round. I'm not saying it's justified. I think Kalen DeBoer is a good coach, and I think he's the right guy for Alabama still right now. But all politics are local, and I have a feeling it could get very uncomfortable if they don't get things done this weekend after being the team of controversy for 2 years and having someone else openly flirting with your head coach right now in the Michigan job, hanging out there in the wind. So I think that's pretty unquestionable going. Everyone else, like, I don't know, like Oregon and Ole Miss, certainly, if one of them goes and gives up the goods against a group of five, everyone's going to point and laugh at them. But I think in terms of walking in, knowing what the expectation is, it is Bama without question. Let's get to overreaction or not here quickly and look at some other headlines that we've had off the past week or so. We had the Heisman Trophy handed out this past weekend. Congratulations to Fernando Mendoza, incredibly deserving winner. He's number one out of Indiana, their first Heisman Trophy winner, followed by Diego Pavia and then Jeremiah Love from Notre Dame. Those are the top three vote getters. Julian Sand was also there as a finalist. He finished fourth. And this picture went viral. So overreaction or not, Diego Pavia is lying about his height. I mean, not an overreaction at all. Most of these guys lie about their height and weight in some form and fashion. And we saw this. So Mendoza, I believe, is listed at like 6'5". I think J Love is listed at like 6 foot or 6'1". And you can clearly see, I mean, Fernando Mendoza is nowhere near the picture in that, which to me, like, fine. Like, lying about a guy's list height, who cares? Like, and I understand for Diego Pavia did not cover himself in glory in the way that he acted in the 24 hours after losing the Heisman, between posting about Bleep the Voters on his Instagram, going out to the club and, you know, having a bottle service sign that said F Indiana on it, which I don't know if he set that up or not, but there's a video of him giving that sign the middle finger. So you do the math. It didn't look great, but, like, I don't know. All this stuff doesn't obscure to me. The height doesn't obscure to me. That guy, I'm a Heisman voter. My ballot went Jeremiah Love, Diego Pavia, and Fernando Mendoza. Diego Pavia, turn on the Vanderbilt tape every week and tell me what that team looks like without him, because I don't know what it is. They've gotten better at so much stuff, but he still covers up for so many of the issues on that team. Dynamic rusher, in addition to being a quarterback that could be counted on to put some balls into some tight windows. Like, some of the magic him and Eli Stowers, his tight end, made was incredible. So I have a lot of respect for Diego Pavia's game. Certainly learning moments for everyone on how to handle things better in moments like that. Overreaction or not, Arch Manning, a legit Heisman contender next season. Not an overreaction at all. I think Arch Manning, the back half of the season, my buddy Nate Tice over at Yahoo said if he left this year, he'd be the number one quarterback for him coming off the board. And we do this thing now where we don't give anyone time, especially not someone with that last name and the expectations he did. But as the season wore along, played a lot better football going towards the year. Certainly the Georgia game, he met that team at the moment they were starting to really have their tires catch the ground. But I thought he showed a lot of improvement, calm down. Whatever physically was going on with him earlier in the year, I don't know if there was like an injury to a core muscle thing where the ball was fluttering, if it was truly the yips, and he was just nervous, but he looked more comfortable. He settled into Sark's offense, which gives you a lot of options and tools to kind of insulate you from defenses being able to go crazy on your end, even without an offensive line that I thought was up to the standard of years past for Texas. And, man, he looked like a guy who can get it out there. Not the strongest arm in the world, but dynamic athlete in terms of what he can do moving the ball around. And I think now, with an offseason under his belt where he's got all that game tape and experience to go back from, I do think that's a legitimate Heisman candidate next year. Notre Dame opting out of a bowl is weak. Overreaction or not? I'll say overreaction. Like, I understand everyone's going to disagree with me on that and point the Homer thing on here, but I say this as a former player who was also part of a team in 2009. Now, we were 6-6 and going through a coaching change. It's a little different. It's more analogous to, you know, what Kansas State and Iowa State are going through. We made the same decision. We went through that process of our leadership council and senior captains kind of taking the poll and temperature of the team and saying, hey, we think it'd be best if everyone went their separate ways at this point. Because this was like a game of whack-a-mole in terms of what people wanted to be mad about. First, what I heard was, well, how dare Marcus Freeman and this administration take away the opportunity from these seniors, from these players to go out there one last time and do their thing. And then it was, all right, well, we saw plenty of reporting and found out that, you know, the senior captains, the leaders and the team, the assistant coaches all kind of took the temperature on the roster, and this felt like the consensus decision for everyone. And then it's, well, now the administration is using the players and Marcus Freeman as a shield for the decision they wanted to make to stick it to ESPN. Like, I understand everyone wants to go conspiracy theory on this right now. I think that team got shocked by this news in a way that few teams do in a time where it's different. This is not a shock where you're left out of the 4-team playoff back in the day and then you get to go play in a New Year's Six Bowl. It's not like when I was in school and you were left out of the BCS having to accomplish at an incredibly high level. You had a team that was told by the committee incorrectly for weeks that the head-to-head didn't matter, and then all of a sudden it did at the end. And they were stunned and pissed, and if they had another night to sleep on it, I don't know if they'd have made the same decision on that. Was emotion actually a part of this? Absolutely it was. Is it understandable? Hell yeah. I've seen lists since of the players that would have more than likely not participated in that bowl game because they were banged up in a way that, yeah, you would risk if a championship is on the line, but not if the edible Pop-Tart was on the line. Or you were a guy with a draftable future that certainly wasn't going to be playing in a game like that. I think there's a million reasons that made this a decision that I can understand for Notre Dame right now. Their athletic director, Pete Bavacqua, came out and said, this is not going to be Notre Dame boycotting non-CFP bowls every year from here on out. That's not what this is. But this team went through something different than we'd seen in a short sample size, and they made a decision that they thought was best for them. And as long as the players had agency in that decision, especially the upperclassmen who would potentially be forfeiting their last game, I can understand and I can ride with that as long as they've got that. So end of rant. Last one here. No chance that DeBoer leaves Bama. I'll say overreaction just because, there's a chance. I don't think it's a good one. It wouldn't make a lot of sense to me on either side, but this college football, anything can happen. So I wouldn't be stunned if that ended up being the case here. Let's wrap things up with our quarterback tree of trust going into the college football playoff. So now we're specifically dealing with the coaches that are the quarterbacks that are left in the dance. We kind of did this with quarterbacks all year where it was guys we projected or guys that we wanted to reward for a week. These are the ones that we're going to be talking about that actually have a chance to impact their title. So easy to start with up top. I'd say the Heisman Trophy winner probably gets first bite at this. So Fernando Mendoza, we go 1 quarterback up top, 2 in the middle, 5 in the bottom, which is why there are going to be a couple not represented here since that only gives us, to my count, 8 quarterbacks that we can talk about. Fernando Mendoza, number 1, you saw it in big moments all season long. That was the basis of his Heisman campaign. Certainly in the Big Ten Championship, you go back to the big throw to Omar Cooper Jr. in the Penn State game, understandable there. Julian saying, I think still, regardless of, a Big Ten Championship performance where, both quarterbacks, it was more about moments than overall output. Guy you trust. And then Dante Moore, who's the apple of the eye of the NFL right now, outside of Mendoza, most people's view is like the second quarterback off the board if he were to leave. I think we have a chance to see his best football. I know at practice there was an open period for Oregon in the lead up to this game. And you look right now, DK Moore, Gary Bryant Jr., Evan Stewart had all missed either some or, in Stewart's case, all of the season so far. With various injuries, and we're out at practice, at least in shells. Now everyone was, so it's kind of hard to tell who's going, but if you get the full complement of receivers back all of a sudden, that could be a dangerous team. If the offensive line's got a little time to get healthy, I know they were banged up at the end of the year. All that makes for a more comfortable environment for a quarterback that's as talented as any that we have left in the field. And then the rest of the group here, we already talked about some. Trinidad Chambliss, who we've highlighted on this show for his playmaking ability, both with his arm and his legs, has been sensational. Carson Beck, who is a veteran player. Casey O'Shea asking for Sam Levitt. He's not in this because he's not in the playoffs. R. Patter's 9-11. How many of those led a top 5 offense like Baron Morton? I'm glad you brought up Texas Tech because I figured someone was going to say something like that for a team that absolutely has gaudy offensive numbers. I don't think it is a great offense. I think it's an offense that is good, and I think it's an offense that can be timely, but I think it's an offense that largely benefits statistically from how many opportunities its defense gets it by turning over the football, by forcing 3-and-outs as rampantly as they do. Again, go watch the Big 12 championship thing. That was not a good offensive day for Texas Tech, but they have a great defense who gave them opportunity after opportunity, and then they went down and would kick field goals. So, Baron Morton is a good player, a great leader for that team. I got to cover them early in the season. I have a ton of respect for that dude, the way he handles his business, how important he's been for Joey McGuire's staff. But I also think that he's got legitimate flaws in his game as a quarterback that are okay to talk about when we're grading at this level. So that is why he is not on this list for me, and that is why I have concerns about Texas Tech's offense when they go up against a team that's got firepower on both sides of this and might be able to have some success against that defense. Easier said than done because that group can rip. Marcel Reed's the one I have, I think, the most has a lot on his plate going into this weekend. Like, he's a guy, again, it's been super dynamic at points. They need him to go and shake off the cobwebs. That offensive line is going to have their hands full, and Reed under pressure is going to have to be decisive. If he tries to do too much, I think it's going to go badly against this. Gunnar Stockton played better football as of late. Sans the Georgia Tech game, I think he was trying to out Haynes King in that game. It was a lot of tuck and run off the first read, but that's a guy, incredible toughness, has been part of these second half Bulldogs all year long. And I think given what he went through last year, also having to step in the SEC championship, having to go up against Notre Dame in that playoff game, see a lot and get that experience at this stage, that is one thing I am very much keeping an eye on this year is, what does the institutional knowledge mean for the teams that did have experience at this last year? How much does that benefit them, especially as we talking about the second, third game and beyond like that? And then Ty Simpson, who we mentioned, Alabama under a lot of pressure. Ty Simpson's got to go out there and ball. This Alabama team can't run the football. We saw that clear as day. He's got to be able to stretch the field passing with Jeremy Bernard, with Ryan Williams, who's had a down year relative to expectations. So, but still, incredibly talented player that on his best day this year has had some really impressive throws, again, in an offense that doesn't have a ton of balance to it. And we know is been down some playmakers at tight end, certainly in a way that's up in the air. The defense is without its best pass rusher. I think I saw Overton was out for this game. And so you got some things that you can overcome, but a quarterback that I think is talented enough to do it. And that's a wrap for today here. We've got it laid out. We've got what I think is a really good playoff field. I know there were disagreements on how we got to it. The committee's got stuff to work on. The sport's got some things organizationally to work on. But I think we're going to get some really good football games. And again, I'm excited to be at one of them. Me and Johnny Manziel going to be doing the pregame show here on Bleacher Report before that Texas A&M Miami game, which I think in terms of the point spread, Alabama and Oklahoma might be closer. I think A&M's a 3.5 point favorite at home, something like that. But it's still, I think, two very similar, very talented teams, incredible defenses in an environment that I can't stress enough, being in South Bend last year for the first college football playoff home game and seeing what that stadium, where I played in games, been to games since I was a little kid growing up, and how much it exceeded any of those environments based on the intensity. Kyle Field, the 12th man, all that stuff is going to be bonkers in this setting with a really good Miami team coming to town. So check that out. Thanks as always to everyone in the chat. Thanks to producer Ryan for making it all happen today. We're here every week and still will be going forward. Little break around the holidays, but we'll be here right around New Year's as well to get you set for the games going into that weekend too, reacting to plenty of what we see in the first round this weekend, the rest of bowl season as the coaching carousel and some of the offseason quarterback news starts to take shape. We'll be ready. So make sure you come and check us out here on the app, on the YouTube channel, all that good stuff. Thanks again. Enjoy the games this weekend. We'll talk to you soon.